What is up, everybody? Welcome to my review of Tiger King Season 2, Episode 1. This episode is titled Beg Your Pardon. Of course, there's going to be spoilers, so if you haven't seen it yet, go watch Tiger King Season 2 on Netflix. It is airing right now. Alright, here we go. March 19th, 2020. Because of COVID, a stay-at-home order is issued across the United States and most of the world. And that's when Tiger King debuts on Netflix and takes over your television, takes over everybody's television worldwide. Joe Exotic is interviewed from the prison. He still has that amazing mullet, and it might be better than ever. He states that he hasn't seen the documentary and would love to see himself being famous. He states that guards ask for his autograph, sing his country songs, and even tell him that they buy his underwear online. Joe Exotic states that everyone from the zoo is out there making money, and he's paying the price for all of them. He states that he will die making sure they pay for him having to spend his life in prison. Jeff Lowe, one of the people responsible, possibly the main person responsible for Joe Exotic being in prison, states that his life changed overnight because of Tiger King, states that he has probably signed somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 autographs. The zoo has a lot of complaints. It stayed open during COVID even though they know tigers can contract COVID-19. States that they had to hire security because of all the trespassers they had coming onto his property and onto the zoo. Joe Exotic states that he is in prison because of Jeff Lowe. Joe Exotic now talks about Dylan Passage, states that he just wants his 5 minutes of fame, states that he has turned into a monster. John Ranke states that he believes Joe Exotic will get out of prison, and he's not the only one. Many people worldwide believe that Joe Exotic should be freed from prison. It does seem that there's way more people out there that support Joe Exotic than are against Joe Exotic. Staff states that this is exactly what Joe wanted. Minus the being in prison part, this is exactly what Joe Exotic wanted. He wanted to be this famous. He wanted to be on TVs all over the world. He wanted to be on billboards in Times Square. And now he's getting it, but he's in prison and can't see it. Brittany Pete from PETA is upset that Carol Baskin came out as the bad guy, and it's the hashtag Free Joe Exotic that trends worldwide. She believes it should be the other way around. She believes that Carol Baskin should be looked at as the victim in this case and not Joe Exotic. Even O.J. Simpson came out and stated that he thinks Carol Baskin fed her first husband, Don Lewis, to the tigers. Who remembers that TikTok song that blew up? They talk about how they are asking President Donald Trump, president at the time, for a pardon for Joe Exotic. Eric Love, leader of Team Tiger, is the force behind the pardon campaign that they are trying to get President Donald Trump to sign. He's the one leading it all. They got a jet with Joe Exotic's name on it. They got a bus with Joe Exotic's name on it. He's the driving force behind all of that. Now, Joe Exotic's current lawyers, Jeff Hoover and Francisco Hernandez, believe that Joe Exotic got screwed. They state that no inmate has gotten this much support. They believe that no other inmate has this much fan support than Joe Exotic. Brittany, again from PETA, says people feel bad because they feel Jeff Lowe and James Garretson may have set him up. And there's a lot of information out there that does allegedly prove that. James Garretson states that his jet ski business suffers a lot online when it comes to reviews and such because of Tiger King. But yet, he's back on the show, so it can't be all that bad, right? Then Mike Busey, a podcaster, his podcast is called The Sausage Castle. I think that's a fantastic name. That's absolutely hilarious. And he asks James Garretson straight out if he thinks Joe Exotic paid someone to kill Carol Baskin. Now remember, James Garretson was part of the whole situation that involved Joe Exotic getting arrested for the murder for hire of Carol Baskin. Now, he states he does not think that Joe Exotic attempted to pay someone for the murder for hire of Carol Baskin, states that he thinks that Jeff Lowe and Glover worked out some sort of deal, and that is why Joe Exotic is sitting in prison now for the murder for hire of Carol Baskin. He does not believe that he actually did it. He states he's pretty sure Jeff Lowe is behind it all. Joe Exotic's lawyer states that James Garretson wanted to be a big shot. Then all of a sudden he gets to be a government agent. So to avoid his own charges, he's dancing with the devil, meaning that he agrees to work with the government. Joe Exotic's lawyer states that Jeff Lowe should have been the first person charged and prosecuted because he drove the money. Joe Exotic was actually the youngest, I didn't know this, Joe Exotic was actually the youngest police chief in Texas. I don't know if that still stands to this day, but at the time, he was the youngest police chief in Texas. Jeff Lowe states if people knew the real Joe Exotic, there would be no free Joe Exotic t-shirts out there. Man, this documentary goes back and forth like crazy, definitely showing both sides of things. Yari, who is Joe Exotic's brother, states that he didn't watch the show, states that Joe Exotic screwed over 1 million people, states he didn't watch the documentary because he lived it. He lived it his entire life, and states that he doesn't want to see it anymore, he doesn't want to live it again, states he hasn't seen Joe face to face in 20 years and doesn't want to because it wouldn't be pretty, states that growing up they had a black lab that had puppies, and their father took the puppies, this is absolutely disgusting, states that their father took the puppies, put them in a sack, threw them in a pond, and drowned them because he being their father, knew that it would mess them up. If that doesn't explain a lot of what happened, of why Joe Exotic is perhaps like he is to this day, I can't imagine. That is one of the most horrible things I've ever heard in my life. Sickening and sad, and I'm going to assume that nothing happened to Joe Exotic's father because of that, but it's so sad, so sickening, and definitely explains a lot of why Joe Exotic, of who he is today, that would mess up anybody. And having it done when you're a child, I couldn't imagine. Joe Exotic states that he was raised in a broken family and he didn't know anything else. Joe Exotic talks about becoming a cop at the age of 19 because he wanted to save people and help people. He was the youngest cop in the state of Texas at the time. Kimberly Kraft, who is Joe Exotic's ex-fiance, states that she had 2 kids and a husband that beat her, and Joe Exotic was the officer that got the warrant for his arrest. States that the entire time she was engaged to Joe Exotic, they never had sex. She later found out that he was stripping for the mayor and all her friends. So the youngest officer, the youngest police chief in the state of Texas, was now stripping for the mayor and all her friends. Just when you think this story couldn't get any more weirder, it does. She states, Joe Exotic's ex states, that she didn't want to believe that he was gay, but he was. Joe Exotic talks about in the late 80s when he was 19, that's when he came out as being gay, and he broke off his engagement with Kimberly, but at the time they remained friends. Kimberly states that Joe Exotic told her that he didn't want to be gay, and Joe Exotic states that he attempted suicide many times. States that he spent many nights on the phone to suicide hotlines, and then he met Brian, his first husband, and they were together for 16 years, and that's when Joe Exotic cleaned up his life. States that officers used to make fun of him because he was gay. States that he was bullied for being a gay police officer in Texas. Joe Exotic states that you shouldn't be ashamed to fall in love. Joe Exotic, here we go. Joe Exotic states that he has text messages between James and Jeff stating they wanted him in prison. Joe Exotic states he also has text messages from Jeff to Dylan. States that he is going to beat the gay out of Dylan, but they do not use the term gay. They use another derogatory term. They state they had a petition of more than 200 pages that was filed for the pardon of Joe Exotic. The leader of Team Tiger says they have all the proof they need to show that Joe Exotic is innocent. 3 weeks later, they state they had a meeting set up with Donald Trump to talk about it, but then Trump tested positive for COVID. Joe Exotic says his team was supposed to have a sit-down dinner with Donald Jr., and then Trump got admitted to the hospital, so they had to reschedule. Dylan Passage states that he is skeptical of why Eric Love is doing this, spending all kinds of money and doing this plane up and doing the bus up and spending tons and tons of cash on someone he has never met. He believes that Eric Love may have ulterior motives. They go back to talking about Brian, the one that really grounded Joe Exotic when he was younger. Unfortunately, Brian got lung cancer and he was also HIV positive. Just terrible. Joe Exotic would take him to the hospital, and then one time when Joe was taking Brian to the hospital, he passed away in the parking lot. Kimberly, Joe's ex-fiance, states that that is what messed Joe Exotic up, that he wasn't the monster he is now before Brian passed away. States that he changed drastically after the passing of Brian. Staff, the zookeeper that lost his arm, states that he knows he wasn't doing what was best for the animals, and stated that if Joe Exotic wanted to get rid of an animal, he would make sure it got done. Josh, who was Joe Exotic's former campaign manager when he ran for governor and president or something along those lines, states that the animals are the ultimate victims here, but doesn't believe Joe should be in prison for 22 years. Joe Exotic states that the prosecution didn't believe they could get the murder for hire charges to stick, so they charged him with 18 animal charges to make him look like a horrible animal murderer. Joe Exotic's lawyer states that the animal charges were added because the murder for hire charge was so weak and they knew they couldn't prove it. On January 6, 2021, the team heads to Washington, D.C. to try and get Joe Exotic's pardon signed. After they leave the Trump rally, they were unsuccessful in getting the pardon signed. That's when people stormed the Capitol building. And then before Donald Trump left office as president of the United States, he did not sign the pardon for Joe Exotic. He did sign some pardons, but none of them were for Joe Exotic. They were so confident that Donald Trump was going to sign this pardon that they had a limo outside of the prison Joe Exotic was at, waiting for his release. Joe Exotic says for him, this is all about finding the truth of what happened to Don Lewis. Doesn't understand why Carol Baskin is walking free and he is the one in prison. He and most of the world believe that Carol Baskin allegedly fed her husband to tigers, or at the very least had something to do with her first husband's disappearance. And Joe Exotic doesn't understand why more isn't being done to look into that, more being done to prove that. And he's not the one that should be in prison. She should be the one that's in prison. Well, that's where episode 1 of season 2 ends. A lot to take in on this episode, a lot to digest. What do you guys think? What do you guys think of the Joe Exotic situation in general? What did you think of season 1, and what do you think of the first episode of season 2? Do you think this is going to be as big as a hit as season 1? Will it be bigger? It's quite possible. Came out today. Let me know what you think. Drop some comments below. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you again soon.